We're going live right now. Hope you're well wherever this may find you and this may be. It's a monumental day today, the most monumental of all days. If you were waiting and wondering, this was the time. If ever there was a time where you were wondering, this is it. We're here, lads. We're here. Ladies and gentlemen, not lads only, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, for all of you who are wondering when the day would finally come where somebody would, like, what's that word called? Stick their head from out the parapet and decide to aim their guns, their knives, their words, whatever it may be at Brendan Schaub. This is it. And the funny thing about it is that um the person who subjected him to the most damage in media or publicly has been Ariel Helwani, which is funny too, right? Because for the longest time, Brendan's kind of retort or like push back against people having some genuine questions and some genuine criticisms for how he's basically turned into a very unlikable person over the last 5 years or so, has genuinely been that you can't tell him anything because you haven't been as successful as him, right? That's his like thing. You can't tell him nothing, you're not as rich as him, you're not as strong as him, whatever. Yeah, he's got that kind of like playground bully type of way of thinking about things. Now he's finally had somebody who doesn't need anything from him, kind of operates on his own, in his own world. He's not one of those Joe Rogan acolytes that kind of needs to kind of, that's it, right? Joe Rogan or Joe Rogan. He's not one of those Joe Rogan acolytes who needs to watch what he says around Brendan because he doesn't want to upset him, which might indirectly affect his relationship with Joe Rogan. He's somebody who's completely self-made, doesn't need Brendan, so can say what he wants, and is in the world of the thing that he's currently doing, right? It's not like some other guy who came in. It's a guy who's a legit journalist, somebody who's been in the sport for as long as Brendan, probably maybe longer, right? So there's no easy pushback. There's no like, oh, you're just a hater, you're just this, because he's not. How can he be? Because by his logic, by I think Brendan's logic, it says no one that's successful criticizes somebody else, isn't it? Well, they are. Here they are. Here's somebody successful calling you out on your bullshit and saying the way you act, the way you treat people, how you are as a person is, not cool. And again, I'm quite neutral in this. I don't really care either way, to be completely honest. I think it's all super entertaining, as I've covered it from the very beginning. But I just said, like I've said in other videos, I think it's incredibly, what's that word called? It's an incredibly wasted opportunity for Brendan, like I've always said, regardless of how dumb you think he is, how much of an oaf you think he is, how redacted you think he is, how lucky you think he is, fortunate, all these kind of things. I think all those things, especially when you conclude, when you think about his athletic career prior, he tried to become a football player, which is, looking at him, he wanted to be a football player, right? He wanted to be at least have the ability to say that he played a couple of seasons for whoever, right? That's what his dream was. He's built like one. He obviously wanted to be one. It never quite worked out for him. So then for him to finally find success in this whole podcast and stand-up thing is a sick achievement. It's pretty cool, especially off the back of having such a lackluster MMA career, right? So, and he was quite smart as well in the fact that he knew he was never going to become champion. So instead of hanging around and just getting his head kicked in for ages, he decided to kind of bow out before the damage got a bit too bad. Some people would argue the damage has already been done, but hey, story for another day. So then he becomes this huge podcast star, then starts dabbling in stand-up, which I still think was always a bad move, especially off the back of the Showtime special thing. But still, he does it, no worries. And he's successful. He does pretty well. But somehow in that period, I don't know what happened, he went from being like the everyman that everyone was rooting for, or kind of rooting for, halfly, yeah? He's sort of like your weird, redacted older brother or cousin that you know somewhere, right? It's a bit of an oath, can be a bit of annoying. They can be annoying, but at the end of the day, you got love for them. That's what you looked at Brendan was. That's how you looked at Brendan anyway in the past. And then suddenly something changed. I don't know what happened. Some people would say it's the money. I don't know if it's just money. I don't know if it's just success. It might be the relationship with Joe. The fact that instead of it being like Joe talking down to him, they became kind of equals in their relationship, in how often he was on the show and hanging around. I don't know. Something changed and he has never really been able to recover. I point to the change. I'm not sure if you guys agree. I pointed to the real Brendan Schaub change and how he started to kind of put people off, or he put me off specifically while I stopped listening to the show. Because I'm not like these guys who go in these comments and start leaving mad trolling comments. I don't think that's necessary. I think if you don't like something, just stop listening, stop watching. Like, you should vote with your feet, or vote with your ears, vote with your time, and usually they'll notice, right? Look at T5K's views. Back in the day, I was mentioning in the chat, back in the day, they had like, what was it, 400K, I think, minimum. Some of the episodes we get, especially the Sasso, Cristaleo, earlier ones, would get like easily 500,000 views in the first week that they dropped. Now they just about struggle to get 100,000, and they've only started to get it since Brian Callen's come back to the show. So clearly, people are being turned off by him. But you know, if you get enough fans, they can hang around. But I think my time when I came and I realized I wasn't really a fan of the show anymore, and mostly because of Brenda's personality, was, I don't know if you guys remember. Do you remember when he spoke about that, which is against a meme now, but do you remember when he mentioned that story about throwing that guy through a glass window? Right? It was some story. Again, I don't remember it too correctly, but from what I can remember, somehow he had some sort of altercation with a teammate in his football team, and then it got to a point where they were like stealing each other's food or something, some sort of passive aggressive thing, which then led to Brendan stealing the guy's food. He told him not to do it. They got into some sort of verbal disagreement. Brendan tried to get the kid to fight him or something. He didn't want to fight for whatever reason. And then I think he spat in his face and then threw him through a window. I don't know how it transpired, but that's how it sounded wild when he said it, right? And I think at the time, you know, he's saying it to Brian, and Brian obviously is a bit of a cuck for Brendan, so he's not going to call him out on it. But in the following week, someone emailed in and said, "Hey, that story you told was a bit fucked up, right? I'm fans of the show. I like what you guys are doing, but that could be viewed really weird how you basically spoke about the show, because essentially it felt like you were bullying the guy and it just sounded a bit abusive, blah, blah, blah." It was a fairly run-of-the-mill letter. It wasn't that big of a deal, that the flipping email. And I just remember like Brenda's demeanor, like super defensive. He started rolling his eyes, started saying weird shit. I was like, oh, this guy's a bad dude, isn't it? Like, he's just like, this is who he actually really is. You know what I mean? I think he was pretending a lot, trying to be this other guy, and then now he's got success, and he doesn't feel like he owes the fans an explanation. He doesn't feel like he owes any, well, not explanation, but he doesn't feel like he owes, like, he doesn't look like he kind of treats the fans like, you know, like they're below him, which I think Ariel Helwani touched upon it on his video. He does kind of have that kind of, you know, higher, I'm above you guys, you don't need to talk to you in a certain way sort of thing. So it is quite interesting to see that he's been brought back down to earth in a somewhat degree by somebody like an Ariel, especially when you consider everything that's occurred. So anyway, going to get into it now. Going to break down the Ariel stuff, but before we begin, we're going to quickly go over an overview which I found on the Fighter and the Kids subreddit. So definitely check those guys out. The homeless cats, they're the best. Someone put together a quick little 5-minute roundup as to why they're having this kind of tete-a-tete and what's kind of led to it, and then we'll obviously roll straight into the Ariel Helwani video. So let's bloody do this.
My sports bitches.
New merch out now. Pink Power. Only at Mike Sports Represent Store.
When you're talking about talking, when you're thinking about thinking, are you guys following? Brendan Schaub, Ariel Helwani. I don't know where these two can't get it right. How are they in this back and forth?
The beef begins.
I see Ariel's there.
Yeah.
How's that going over?
And I'm here.
No. But how's that?
How do you think he got the job?
but how's that going
I didn't
over?
want to do it.
I've been sitting back for the past 18 months, and I've seen a lot of people take shots at Helwani. Well, guess what? I'm punching back. An individual named Brendan Schaub, who was lying constantly about me. You said that you got the job first from Showtime, and I only got it because you turned it down.
Round 2.
I've never personally worked with Ariel, ever. He's the closest thing we have to Stephen A. Smith, right?
Best way that he was going to be able to win was use his wrestling. Right. Try to take him down.
The only thing I've heard about Ariel, and I've heard it from a million people, does not play well with others.
Yeah.
Anybody I know who's ever worked with him does not have nice things to say. Anybody I've ever talked to in the MMA space says do not work with him.
Shots fired.
Sitting back in his little chair. I've heard from a million different people that this guy is the worst to work with. He is the worst colleague on the planet. I have heard this from all... Who are your sources, Brendan? Who are your sources? You don't sit around and talk about someone's character like that. That's not how this works. You smeared my name publicly and lied about me publicly. So I want you to go on your public little show, and I want you to apologize to me. And so once he does, the beef will be squashed.
The apology.
Then you had time to think about it, and you feel a little
I feel
bad.
bad.
Now,
You're referring to
might
Ariel
be-
Helwani.
I might be referring to Ariel Helwani.
I saw you on Monday. I go, I made a mistake. I have no issue with Ariel.
I know.
Him working at Showtime has nothing to do with me. We don't even do the same job.
Yeah, I know.
So I made it seem like the only reason he was there is because I turned it down. That's not the way it went down.
Yeah.
And I apologize for it. I texted him, apologize for it. He wrote me this novel. There's obviously some underlying other issues that he has issues with.
With you mean, or
In general, if you're a sensitive guy, that's what it is.
so
Just to butt in there, guys in the chat. On this occasion, because it's quite clear, Ariel was obviously trolling a little bit and obviously poking the bear by saying your little show. But at the heart of it, if they had, so for instance, Brendan obviously saw what Ariel said on that show, which I think might have been his show when he was guesting on Pat McAfee's show. Then they had some sort of text exchange where he basically was telling him, I'm sorry, and they had a bit of a heart to heart. Then he goes on his show and does that. When all Ariel asked for was apology. Why do you guys think he just didn't say, oh, okay, my bad, sorry, I was where I lined, I shouldn't have said that and moved on? What do you guys think there? Because I think at the time, I thought Brendan was just muddling up his words and he lost track of time and of what he was saying. And then by the time it was time to apologize, he was like, nah, fuck that, I'm not going to apologize, and just moved on. But now that time has gone by, it feels like it was more malicious, like as if he actually always had a problem with Ariel, as opposed to before. It made it, from what we kind of got the assumption of what he was trying to say without saying, was that because I think he used that analogy about it being a drone strike, right? So I got the impression that maybe the whole drone strike thing was like, oh, he's got more of a beef with Showtime, and he was more pissed that Showtime got Ariel involved, right? And that they didn't get, well, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? But now looking at it, it feels like he just had a problem with Ariel. What's that you say? Laurie Flanagan said he can't admit he's wrong. I think Laurie's right there. I think that kind of summarizes everything I've been waffling on about. He just can't admit he's wrong in it. So he couldn't basically say sorry, because it wasn't that even a big of a deal. They had a bit of a disagreement, a little bit of banter online, some poking, some teasing, but it didn't need to get this far. He could just say, okay, my bad. I've never worked with the guy actually, so it wasn't my place to say, I'm sorry, dude, and just keep it moving. But he legitimately couldn't say it.
Sounds like he just wants to have dialogue.
I don't,
You don't know,
I don't,
yeah.
that's not what I do.
I know a lot of you now want to hear my take on Brendan's segment about me yesterday, I think it was. I knew he was never going to apologize. Of course I knew he wasn't going to come back and be as sincere as he was on this text on camera. He can't do that. And so the funniest thing about the whole thing is I'm watching this segment. He doesn't even bring it up. His boy Brian brings it up, who continued to say, Ariel's so sensitive, Ariel's so sensitive, Ariel's so sensitive.
Ariel's a very sensitive
Maybe
guy.
you'll see tonight.
Yeah, he's very sensitive.
Okay.
Ariel's too sensitive for that.
Yeah.
But he's sensitive.
Oh,
Some
okay.
people are.
What makes you
The irony of them calling Ariel sensitive, looking back on it, is just amazing, isn't it? Considering they both sat on a podcast and cried openly about one of their friends being, at the time, alleged or being accused of being a flipping, a kiddie fiddler or whatever it may be. Imagine you have the guts to call someone sensitive when you're crying because your Hollywood celebrity friend who has a dad who works in the industry and has made a lot of money over the years is getting cancelled because he can't keep his, pee-pee in his panties around young girls, and you're crying? You are crying and you're calling somebody else sensitive because they dare to get annoyed that you're maybe tarnishing their reputation and adding to the false narrative that exists out there about them? Honestly, exactly. Imagine the guts, the balls you'd have to call somebody sensitive after you cried because your best friend, who wasn't your best friend at the time, right? Do you remember that whole exchange? Oh yeah, I would never went on tour with Chris. I never went on tour.
do
Oh,
you think I'm so sensitive? Is it because I'm annoyed that for the past 5-6 years, you guys keep saying these lies about me and I've never even responded once?
The UFC 199 rumor.
UFC 199, he leaked the Brock Lesnar news and got his credentials pulled and banned from the UFC.
That was Dana, right? Because Dana got
That was
mad about
Dana.
it.
That was the UFC. You got to remember at UFC 199, what was the UFC trying to do with UFC 200 announce Brock Lesnar? Sell the company.
Yeah.
They're trying to get evaluated for the maximum, whatever, $4 billion.
Yes.
And then having Brock Lesnar was going to do that. So by him stealing their shine and releasing it, It's a business. That's why Dana was like, "You're out of here."
The UFC 199 thing continues to be retold in a 100% inaccurate way. You know, the reason why the UFC doesn't like Ariel is because he was told backstage that Brock Lesnar was coming back and then there'll be an announcement. And then he went and wrote it up. That never happened. Brendan is sitting there 5 years later after I've addressed this a gazillion times saying, look, you know, he made his bed and he has to line it. I got it just like anyone gets any story, sources, hand to God. I had no idea there was going to be an announcement that night. I didn't know when they were going to announce it. You know how many times I've been told things off the record? You know how many times I've been told things in the vault, you can't repeat this? If I would have broken that trust once in my career, I'm done. Nothing is bigger than breaking someone's trust. Like, you would never do that.
Unless one of them drops it, it will be a fight. Brendan and Ariel will be fighting. I don't take a joy in that. I'm not here to promote it, but I will be covering it.
Whose side are you on, Ariel's or Brendan's? Comment down below.
So yeah, big up that guy who made that. That was a big one, obviously. And yeah, what's the chat saying quickly before we move on? He had been alcoholic for what's that? Moose? What's that? I remember one day not liking Schaub and thinking maybe I was a hater. Then every person started to take shots at him. Very true. Went on to stand up in Denver. It wasn't too bad. He was pretty lit though by P. Oh, really? Okay, cool. Good to know. From the bits I've seen online of his doing his actual new material, he hasn't looked like he's improved that much actually. And again, it's not his fault. It's not me. Look, I think everyone should go and achieve their dreams and do whatever they need to do in life. I just think it's when it comes to certain artistic entertainment type professions, it's just very unlikely you're going to go from being like myself, like a somewhat sedentary, man, to somehow becoming a ballerina. Do you know what I mean? It's just the skill gap and the knowledge gap is just too big to make it worthwhile to even attempt to do. Do you know what I mean? What's the point? I wouldn't do that. So when it comes to comedy, when it comes to like singing, rap, I don't know, all that sort of shit, yeah, you could start it now and maybe become a success later on down the line, but if you don't have a comedic bone in your body and you suddenly try and become a stand-up, it's not going to work. Like, I think the only recent example we have of that is that guy called Dean Del Rey, right? The one that hangs around with, he's friends with Joey Diaz, has a really good podcast. I've got his name. He does like music podcasts. I've got his name. It's good interviews. Anyway, Dean Del Rey is amazing, right? But Dean Del Rey, if you've heard him on podcasts, he's incredibly interesting to listen to. Super charismatic, has great stories. He's clearly seen and been around the world many times over, seen loads of things, right? So it's no surprise that he could take that same thing and then become, and then become obviously a great stand-up, isn't it? I mean, he could obviously do that with hard work and dedication. But I don't know, man. Like, Brendan just decided to go from UFC to stand-up. That was never going to work. So I never understood why that was the career path. So that knowledge gap is just too much. What other comment we got here? He was lit though. Okay, cool. And then Moose Mirabilia said here he'd become an alcoholic in the last 3 years after drinking. Yeah, that's true. I want to know from people in the chat here. What do you think is what do you guys think is more pathetic? People in the chat, let me know. What do you think is more pathetic? Being a guy like Brendan who wears like every jersey under the sun, right? He supports every team, every franchise. Again, I'm not American, so I don't know how that goes on over there, but I'd pretty much think it's the same like England. You don't support every team. You might have teams on the coast or teams where you're from and teams where you move to, maybe maximum of 2, 3, but you're not going to have 6, 7, 10, 9 teams that you follow. So what's more cringe? What's more embarrassing? Supporting every team, right, that exists in the history of man, under the sun, sorry, or starting to drink alcohol in your late 30s, like getting into whiskey. What's more cringe? Like, I want to know, what is more cringe? Supporting every team under the sun or starting to drink alcohol in your late 30s, or specifically whiskey? I want to know. Let me know in the chat. Let me see what people are saying, because I personally think the whiskey thing is the worst, for sure. The whiskey, like starting to drink, like when you're suddenly now you're a flipping whiskey connoisseur. You got your own bottles and that and shit. You're doing that little finger thing. Like, come on, man, jog on, right? If ever there was a sign that somebody lacks a bit of personality, that's when they start attaching and latching onto things like that. I think drinking whiskey at that age is super similar to people that, get super into smoking weed and shit, and it becomes their whole life, and they start wearing like weed leaf socks and all that nonsense. Like, come on, get a life, man. Smoke like everybody else does, and just keep the things moving. Do you know what I mean? Keep it moving. Okay, people are saying the teams really. You think supporting every team under the sun ways is more cringe than drinking alcohol in your late 30s when you've never drunk alcohol before to that extent? I don't know, man. I think the alcohol thing is weird. Yeah, true, the loyalty thing is true. But I think the teams thing, you could get it. Like, if you just like to watch sports, I understand. Yeah, the whiskey thing, exactly. Yeah, a lot of people wear jerseys. Like, jerseys are just like, they look cool. You like a duck. You like what that logo looks like. But I see Bert's point. Yeah, it's very true. But anyway, let's move on, man. Let's move on. What else people are saying in the chat? Ariel crying when Dana banned him. Yeah, that was funny. See, that's the thing. Brendan's not even funny. He's not even comedic. He doesn't have the thing. There's loads of things you can get Ariel at, but he's trying to bully boy Ariel, which is then making him look worse. How could that ever happen? But it's just, ugh. But anyway, I actually went to Valet and Pierce Chang's, Brian Brennan, cool. Let's continue on. Let's continue on. So that's obviously one part of it. I'm just giving you a timeline. Then we're gonna go to the Ariel Helwani videos, right? So this is what led to the Ariel Helwani, getting super angry, right? And kind of saying what he said. So Brendan went on his podcast, Below the Belt, and there was a story that's been doing the rounds from a website called Bloody Elbow, which is the one I've kind of made a video about before. It's this story here. And this editorial has been doing the rounds. It says UFC 266 showed Joe Rogan can and should be replaced. It's a fairly, in my opinion, I don't know about you guys, but this article is fairly middle of the road. It might be harsh in some bits, but essentially the genesis of the article is that the UFC needs to move on from Joe Rogan. He was a great custodian of the sport beforehand, but he doesn't necessarily offer as much as he did in the past. There's other people who are more maybe deserving and willing and open to take his spot if need be, and they should be given the opportunity to kind of grow, learn into the job, and do what he needs to do. Right? Joe Rogan served his time, shake hands, and keep it moving. That's basically the article, and it's fairly fair, I think. If you go on cards, if you're watching cards live and you go on Twitter or you go on Reddit and stuff and you hear people are saying, people have generally come around to the idea that maybe Joe Rogan isn't as good as everyone thinks he is in terms of color commentating and whatnot. Maybe people's knowledge base has increased a little bit and they're a little bit more clued in into what they're watching. They don't need to hear someone screaming about he's finished when he isn't. So people have maybe moved on. But whatever you think, that's the editorial. And then right after that, there was this editorial that came out basically defending Joe. The UFC would be crazy not to drop Joe Rogan. So it's not as if like it's a one-sided thing. It's just these are on the same websites, right? One basically trashing him and the other one obviously praising him and backing him up. They've even got a picture here of Joe Rogan with bloody DC grinning his teeth off, right? Super happy. So two fairly run-of-the-mill articles, I thought. Anyway, those run-of-the-mill articles, for whatever reason, seem to have triggered Brendan. This is what Brendan said, which led to the Ariel Helwani response.
Unless you book some big name fighter or you have 17 fighters on your show, nobody gives a fuck about your personal opinion. So you have to somehow muster something, trying to figure it out.
Stir the pot.
Because everything you've ever done has never worked out for you. That's how these guys operate. And it doesn't end well for any of them because they don't have any talent. Nobody's paying attention. So they have to book big guests or they have to talk shit about Joe Rogan just to get views. Because if they get on here and rant to a camera like I do for an hour, nobody listens. Because they've never walked the walk. They've never been in the fire. They're reporting on the storm. I've been in the storm.
And just to pause it right there, the funny thing is when I knew he was angry, he's got that kind of like shake at the bottom of his voice, like he's been upset about something. And I don't know whether it's because he finally, because again, there's that meme about, I don't see anything, I don't watch anything, I don't read comments. But maybe him shaking and sounding really upset and really flustered at this point is proof that maybe he doesn't actually watch things ever in full. He might hear stuff. People might send him some clips or he might read something, but maybe he doesn't watch the whole rebuttal. So when he sat down and finally watched what Ariel had said and then read the article about Joe Rogan and then read the comments about it, maybe that's what kind of set him up because he seemed really, really upset here. Really upset.
Joe Rogan hasn't been the storm, but he's witnessed more storms than anybody in the world. He's also a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He's also an inspiration to millions and millions of people. He's also made millions, hundreds of $millions off of podcasts. He's an entrepreneur. These other guys work for the man because they have to. Because they don't have talent, they don't have creativity, they don't have the work ethic to hang with guys like me and Joe Rogan.
So that was the response. Just at the last bit of that Joe Rogan being an entrepreneur. I love the guy. I listen to his podcast all the time. Been listening to it for years, maybe 10 plus years. Is he an entrepreneur though? Can you describe Joe Rogan as an entrepreneur? I don't think so. Because he owns On It. That was already up and running by the time he kind of invested money into it, right? I'm sure he advises and helps out with things like that. But apart from the podcast, what has he actually done business-wise that would lead to be an entrepreneur? Obviously, he's good at podcast business because he's been able to maximize that. Do you know what I mean? The rumors are he got more than $100 million from Spotify. Supposedly, they say it's around the 300 mark. So just to license a podcast, that's something else. That's stupid dumb. Stupid amazing. But to say he's an entrepreneur is a bit weird, isn't it? But again, this is Brendan. He loves to suck up to Joe Rogan and, make it seem like he walks on water. So that can make complete sense. So anyway, that was what Brendan said. And then, of course, we get to the pièce de résistance, what you've been waiting for, the pièce de résistance. It is Ariel Helwani's response on his show, the MMA Hour, where where Ariel Helwani decided to basically finally declare victory on all things concealed relating to Brendan Schaub. And I have to be honest, man, this might be one of the most impressive takedowns I've seen in a very long time. More so impressive because this is coming from somebody no one would expected would have been the one to have said something like this to Brendan. And why do I say that? Because, the guy, you could say, let's say this. I would expect this kind of attack or this kind of response or this kind of just pure savagery, right, to come from a stand-up comedian more so than somebody involved in the MMA UFC world. Because in the stand-up comedy world, Brendan basically came in and in 2 years he leapfrogged everybody, right? He got a Showtime special. He was touring around the country, touring around the world. I think at that time, I'm not sure if he did Australia, but anyway, he was really successful. The podcast numbers were dumb high. He was getting all the brand deals, all the sponsors, like just, living a vida loca. And he was driving into the Comedy Store in like Jeeps and Porsches and shit, right? So just imagine if you're a stand-up comedian and you're doing the door, right? You're all like, for lack of a pun, you're all misty-eyed about the Comedy Store, right? You're all misty-eyed about the Comedy Store, and you're doing the door. You're doing the valet. I don't know. You're doing all the things that you need to do in order to pay your dues. You know what they say? Pay your dues, man. Work hard. Be diligent. Turn up every day, and you're gonna get where you need to get to. And then you see this guy who's like a 2-year comic, right? 3-year comic, 4-year comic, strolling in, turning in with his big body Porsche, right? And he's chucking you the keys, and then going to go crack jokes with Rogan and Bill Burr as they sit and crack jokes in the car park. Just imagine how you must feel. Right, so that's where I would expect those guys or gals to be a little bit more upfront, a little bit more out there with their kind of hatred for Brendan, which again is okay to have. I don't think it's not obviously a useful emotion to be jealous like that, but it is understandable if you've been working in the industry for 10 plus years and a guy that is clearly not that funny, clearly fortunate because he's Joe's friend, leapfrogs you and then turns up in a Ferrari, right? Yeah, you're allowed to be like, what? You're allowed to shake a fist at, at God. You're allowed to. But it took Ariel to be the one to step out and say something, right? It took Ariel to rip into pieces. And again, like Tom mentioned in the chat, this is the same Ariel that cried when his UFC credentials got revoked for life. Do you know what I mean? This guy, right, is the one that supposedly is the one that's been able to take down Brendan in some way. And again, I think it's poetic because I think there's always been a tension anyway, which is why this is kind of still going. I think that they've always kind of slightly hated each other. So this is why it's at where it's at. But again, Ariel, big up, man. You are definitely the CEO of Chang's right now, brother. No one could come next to you. You absolutely eviscerated the guy. So let's start. This is Ariel Helwani's response on MMA Hour Part 1 regarding Brendan.
And so I know a lot of you want me to respond to Brendan Schaub on his show, a great soliloquy, a great rant, 10 or so minutes. Thank you to the PF Chang's crew for the clip. I would never know otherwise, of course. Why would we know? We don't check social media, right? We don't know what's going on. You know, it's like one of those things. It's like, again, do I have to go over this? Again, do we have to talk about this? It's the subtle, not so subtle shots. It's the passive aggressive. It's the quick mentioning of the name. And there's a part of me that doesn't want to drum it up all over again. But then there's a bigger part of me that is tired of the bullies, tired of the BS artists, tired of the fake people. And so I kind of feel compelled, if I may, on behalf of the MMA community, to speak up. And if I may, and they haven't asked me to do this, to perhaps, I don't know, defend our honor. And so I came away from that little clip with a few conclusions. Number one, the biggest one was, this man legitimately thinks that he is better than us. I want you guys to realize that. This man thinks he's better than us. And when I say us, I don't just mean me. I don't just mean the MMA media. I mean you as well. Watch the demeanor. Listen to the words. This man thinks that he is better than us, and he's sitting back and he is talking about, you know, having talent, not having talent, careers, money, jobs, places in life, pecking orders, what you've done, what you haven't done, and casting all kinds of conclusions on people, all kinds of aspersions, all kinds of fabrications on people when really, you know, you don't know what you're talking about.
I just want to rest on that point and continue on the video. I promise I won't pause it too much. I'm going to try and pause it every 2 minutes, so please bear with me. But this is a very salient point that he made there about Brendan having this kind of better than his audience kind of attitude and kind of higher up and, you know, thinking he's a dog's bollocks and shit. And the interesting thing about that point is that on the subreddit, right, the Fighting Kids subreddit, big up all the homeless cats, they've been saying this for a while. They've been saying that he hates his fans, right? This is a common meme that goes around because usually he's seen pictured with these really like awkward looking guys and girls, and he clearly like doesn't want to be there, right, around them. And I think there was a video also of somebody kind of saying hi to Brendan outside of his show, and he just didn't really like it, right? He didn't really like he didn't really like the sight of his fans in real life, you know, when they're not flipping, when you can't see them from the big lights that are kind of flashing behind him and stuff. So, you know, and then when you see his fans, you kind of get it. But this made me think of this point that Joey Diaz said in his podcast, just what's happening right now, back when Lee Sayat was on there. And he made this really good point about it, because I think Lee Sayat was, I think at the time he was threatening to, or he wanted to kind of leave the show and do his own thing. He felt like it was holding him back, or maybe I think he was upset. No, I think he was upset a little bit, or moaning a little bit that Joey Diaz wasn't taking him on road or introducing him to certain people. And I remember Joey Diaz saying to Lisa that I'm better off letting you learn on your own with people your own level than trying to have you hang around me, Bill Burr, and Joe Rogan and stuff, because that's not going to teach you anything. If anything, it's going to do you more damage than good. And I think Joey Diaz is something like, oh, people really fuck up in LA or whatever because everyone's everywhere. You get to bump into people and you get to become friendly, and maybe you get to, what's that word called? You get to befriend a lot of really cool, interesting, rich people. You can somehow confuse yourself that you're on their level just because you hang around with them. Like, for instance, if you go to a jiu-jitsu gym and a really famous, you know, guy in a band is playing, you know, trains there, but you're just a band that plays in flipping, you know, car parks and shit, just because you're around him and you get to talk to him sometimes and he shares you some industry gossip from time to time, you could confuse yourself that you are the same, right? When you're not really. You're better off hanging around with people the same level as you are, and then you go together, you build yourselves up into a crew, and then you become the next kind of, you know, contingency of, you know, the Joe Rogan and that lot, then hang around with him directly. And I think that's what happened to Brendan Schaub. I think Brendan has spent too much time with Rogan and all those guys, and he's confused himself that because he's successful in the podcast or successful in his way, whatever it may be, that somehow he is the same as them, and he's kind of now he has his bigger than attitude. But then the weird thing is, I don't ever think Joe Rogan would do something like this. Do you know what I mean? For all the riches Joe Rogan's got, there's one thing why I like about him. He might be the most chillest, multi-millionairist kind of guy we have in media right now. Don't get me wrong, he has his faults. He's super detached from reality in some regard because, you know, let's face it, even though he talks about his working class roots, he's still been richer longer than he's been poorer. But I still think you would never see Rogan get involved in spats like this. You would never see him piss off anybody else. You never see his whole fan base turn on him. There's certain parts of this fan base that don't like Rogan anymore, but not the entirety of it. Do you know what I mean? So this is just that was a really great point that he made. So anyway, let's continue. Like I said, I only keep pausing every 2 minutes.
And he sits there and he talks about how he wants to be positive, and he talks about how he wants to, you know, have a good, peaceful life. Meanwhile, this is the guy who's been talking shit for the past 5 years. This is the guy who is literally sitting there while talking about being positive, insulting MMA media, saying that they're irrelevant, calling them hacks, while saying that he wants to be positive. This is the guy who, after 5 years of listening to his lies about not just me, but others as well, finally made me snap. Don't get it twisted. This is not a positive fellow. Don't fall for it. It's, again, fake and phony. And now I can't wait to see who calls me, who texts me this time to say, hey, we want to be friends, olive branch, and then not follow through. Because last time it was Brian. The first time it was Brendan. Who's going to follow up this time? Is it Shrimp? Is he going to follow up? I'm tired of the fakeness. And all I said was, all you guys had to do was apologize cleanly once and for all, and this would be over. I wouldn't keep bringing it up. In fact, I'd probably ignore the question like I ignore some of the other questions that people try to get me to answer that are, you know, scraping the bottom of the barrel. But you don't. You make it worse. You sit there and you talk about how MMA media are a bunch of hacks. You sit there and you talk about how MMA media are a bunch of losers who never walked into the fire, who are just weathermen, who have no talent. First of all, let me explain something to all the fighters, all the managers, all the promoters, all the hanger-ons, all the sisters, all the brothers, all the mothers, all the fathers involved in MMA, in the MMA community. Let me be very, very clear about something right here and now, because we've heard it since the beginning of time. We've heard it since we all started. MMA media are hacks. They're losers. They can't hang. They don't know what they're doing. These are the men and women who have devoted their lives in some way, shape, or form to covering you. They're the ones who have told editors, hey, you should focus on this sport. You should focus on these fights, on these fighters, on these organizations. We're usually the first to go, believe it or not. But these are the people that focus on you and cover you and think and talk about you 24/7. It's not the other media that you wish you were covered by. Trust me, I just came from the mainstream. They don't know you like we know you. They don't care about you like we care about you. They don't follow you and cover you like we do. And so whenever you guys talk about MMA media being hacks, what does that say about you? What is that?
Now, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. What Brendan did say about MMA media was partly true. It is a bit cringy. You didn't have to watch some of their flipping press conferences. No, what was it? When they do before like a fight card, they'll have like all the media in the stands and they'll be asking questions of the fighters. It's horrible. Do you know what I mean? Most of the guys there are just asking questions to bait people into responses so they can use that as titles for their shitty websites and stuff. Don't get me wrong, most of it is flipping garbage. For the most part, you get most of your value out of the kind of shows that Ariel does, isn't it, right? The kind of solo MMA kind of UFC type thing. That's where you get most of your sort of value. They go on those shows, they talk about their training camps, they talk about what they're trying to do new, their record, their fight, their thoughts and opinions on certain things going on in the world. That's where you get your real media chunks and stuff from. You don't really get it from those sort of press conferences sort of stuff. So by and large, a lot of the stuff they post is garbage. But like you mentioned, without these platforms, without these sites, without these outlets, who would know about these fighters? Who would care about them, right? They are responsible as much as the fighters are responsible, as much as their families are responsible, as much as the UFC are responsible for giving them a career, right? They all kind of help each other. It's all kind of I wouldn't say it's a symbiotic relationship, but it's a harmonious relationship in some way, shape, or form, right? The more toxic they behave, the more toxicity the reporters report on, the more their names get talked about on social media, the more Dana and the match fixers take notice, the more fights they get. You know what I mean? It's a kind of weird cyclical relationship in that way. So they help each other. And in theory, in all honesty, if these websites go away, MMA Fight, in Bloody Elbow, all these kind of places, where's Brendan going to get his news from that he does his show on with Below the Belt? It's not as if he knows any of this stuff because he's reading it and he's kind of in tune. It's because Chin pulls it up on the screen and he has to just read through it. And he hardly reads the full articles. He's always skimming over stuff, doesn't watch full cards anyway. So he needs these platforms to kind of give him play-by-play what's going on, because if he didn't have them, he wouldn't really know what he was talking about.
What does that say about you when the people who have devoted their lives to covering you are the hacks, are the losers? What does that say about you? Think about what you're saying about yourself. These are the ones covering you. Do people talk about that in other beats? Oh, the baseball media. Yeah, of course, you may not like someone here or there. You may not be on the same page. But we hear this time and again from these people. Oh, they're hacks. They're this, they're that. They've never been through the fire. Meanwhile, not every political reporter has run for president. Not every film critic has made a movie. Not every restaurant critic has run a restaurant. It's a tired, lazy, BS excuse to hide from the other stuff. And you talk about these op-ed pieces. So there was this piece in Bloody Elbow about Joe Rogan. First of all, I don't agree with the piece. I think Joe Rogan is a valued member. I think he's an important part of the sport. I think he should be in a Hall of Fame. He has done a tremendous amount of good for the sport. I have no issues with Joe Rogan's place in the sport. My only issue is the one that I said back in the day, 2016, when he spread the lie, and I'm over it. I don't care. Honestly. My uncle goes on his show. It's all good. But this article was saying that Joe Rogan should be removed from the broadcast. Now, I don't agree with that. I think the way they use him is perfect. 12 shows, it's perfect. Pay-per-views, it feels like a big deal. He's a star. He's one of the biggest comics in the world, one of the biggest podcasters in the world. It makes sense. He was there in the dark days. He's there now. He loves the sport. And then for 35 other events, or whatever the number is, 31 events, you get Bisping and you get DC and you get Paul Felder and you get Dominic Cruz and you get, obviously Anik and Brendan Fitzgerald and John Gooden and Laura Sanko. I mean, you get the best of the best. So I don't agree with it. But every time there's an opinion piece, they're like, this isn't journalism. First of all, you talk about people who don't know what you've been through. Who are you to talk about journalism? What the hell do you know about journalism? Because you sit in front of a microphone? You know about journalism? Because you've been interviewed by people you know about journalism? You don't. And if you did, you would know that since the beginning of time, since the beginning of media, since the beginning of papers, newspapers, internet, radio, the op-ed piece, the opinion piece, the column has been a part of journalism. Everyone knows that there's opinion pieces in the paper, there's straight newsers in the paper, there's something for everyone. And so what's the difference? We're not allowed to have an opinion?
And therein lies the issue, right? Therein lies the issue. I think in general, which is understandable too, because Joe Rogan's kind of worked himself into his position, right? He's a complete, he's a one-man media machine, right? He's probably one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful people in media, without really doing much apart from just recording his own podcast, which is mad to think about. So I get why people are kind of want to walk on eggshells around him and don't want to say what everybody's kind of thinking. But again, as a fan of Joe Rogan and the Joe Rogan experience, and I still listen to it even now, even I can admit, as a fan, again, who got into the UFC and who got into MMA because of the Joe Rogan podcast, even I can admit that the podcast isn't as good as it was before in the past. It might be because Joe Rogan's kind of gone to shit, or because things have moved on. Maybe my interests have changed. Maybe whatever. It's not as good as it was. And it's also true that Rogan isn't as good as he was as a UFC color commentator anymore, because things have maybe evolved in the same way we've seen things evolve in the octagon. There's not many athletes anymore in the UFC. There's not many guys or girls who can just get away with just being good at wrestling or grappling or jiu-jitsu only. You have to be well-rounded. So it's no surprise that if things have evolved in the octagon, that things might have also evolved outside of it. So things change. People now want different commentators. They want people who maybe can analyze things differently, who can maybe spot things that you can't spot, right? I forgot who the guy is in NFL, but there's a guy in NFL that everyone loves who kind of commentates on American football. And I think he was a former player, definitely was a former player, and he calls plays before they happen, right? Because he's obviously, he's flipping incredible, but also he played the game, so he can see stuff that normal commentators couldn't, because I guess most American football players don't probably want to do that commentating job. So he can see it, right? And people are like, oh my god, he's amazing, but that's the level people want now. Maybe back in the days there was more of a rah kind of commentator who everyone was fine with, but now things have changed and moved on. And it's okay to ask the question. Now, is it likely Rogan's going to go anywhere? No, because he's Dana White's guy. They've come up together. It's an easy gig. If Joe Rogan's getting paid $1 million per appearance, let's say, I don't know why he's getting paid, I'm not counting his pockets, but imagine he's getting paid just $100,000 appearance, and he does only 12 of those a year, or 12 of those cards a year, right? That's easy money to just sit, at the side of an octagon watching the sport you love with some of your best friends in the sport and just hang around. Oh yeah, that's the guy, Tony Romo, that's him, yeah. No bother. Who wouldn't do that? Why wouldn't you do that? Why would you quit that job, especially if it doesn't require you to do anything physically taxing? Why wouldn't you do that?
That's a part of covering the sport. So you dismiss this like it's like, oh, that's not journalism. That's not this. Of course, it is journalism. It's a part of journalism. Talk about the hacks. Talk about the guys, who need to talk about you guys for clicks. First of all, they were talking about Rogan. They weren't talking about you. He has the talent, you don't. Let's just call it like it is. He's the guy with the $200 million Spotify deal. You don't. And so don't lump yourself in on that fight. I think it's honorable. I will say, I think it's honorable. The loyalty is nice. I will say that from the bottom of my heart. I like a guy who has a guy's back. Pause. But you know what I'm saying. I like a guy who defends the honor of his friend. You know what I'm saying? I respect that. Much respect. Honestly. But this had nothing to do with you. And you use this article as an opportunity to take shots on a bunch of people. And if I'm being honest, it felt like you were just talking about me. And that's why I'm spending so much time at the end of the show about this. And so let me clear up something right here and now for the final time, because it will be brought up over and over again, and it will still probably be brought up. I have never, in my life, in media, going on 15 years of doing this, I have never had a conversation with an editor, with a website, where someone told me about clicks. Write about this, write about that. I've never been paid off of clicks. I've never been asked to make headlines that are click-worthy, clickbaity. These detractors, these naysayers, love to talk about the clicks and how we write stuff for clicks. No one cares about that. You think that Joe Rogan piece is going to break the bank? You think it's going to change the future of Bloody Elbow, of Vox Media? By the way, Vox owns Bloody Elbow. I don't have anything to do with them, but hey, sister site. You think that changes anything? It doesn't. Stop saying that. And even if it did, you're in the pay-per-view business. You're in the ticket selling business. You're in the podcast business. People in the newspaper business, what do you think? They did things like just for the sake of it, out of the goodness of their heart? Of course, everyone's here to make money. So like when you use that as a reason to hate on something, it's A, inaccurate, and B, stupid, because it's actually, the complete opposite of how people run business. People try to sell things the same way you try to sell merch to no one and rip off logos of other people, the same way you try to sell comedy tickets to no one, and then they have to combine the days. The same way you try to put up podcasts to no one and pay for views and downloads. It's the same thing. You would like to have those clicks. You would like to have those listens. You'd like to have those dollars and cents, but you don't. And the issue is we're all in this to make money, but no one has ever said do this or that in order to get some clicks.
Yo, that last bit was brutal. I wonder if that "you don't" was a little nod at Theo Vaughn or Epic Crystalia. I wonder if that's a nod. But the brutality of the ticket sales and the views and stuff, that's a funny thing again, man. This guy is like, Brendan did this to himself. The ticket sales and all that stuff with the views, he did this to himself, right? Because he made such a big point, right? Such a big point about he doesn't listen to haters, and the only things he keeps attention to are his bank balance and his car and his kids are good and whether or not his wife has new Gucci slippers and shit, right? Cool, no problem. But then when the ticket sales starts to diminish and people start to see it, they're going to use that as the first thing to beat you over the head with. So he kind of gave his detractors an attack vector, as Elon Musk would say, right? Elon Musk would say. He gave them an attack vector because they knew automatically his insecurity isn't how funny he is. His insecurity is not being able to make money. So bang, they got it. Okay, now you're not selling as many tickets. Like on that subreddit, they exposed some venue he's going to play at, and he obviously couldn't sell the tickets to fill that space. It was a pretty big space. Don't get me wrong. So they had to combine the dates, and then when we saw the pictures of it, I don't know, man. Do you know what I mean? We saw the pictures of it, and it looked a bit sparse anyway. Still, even though the dates are combined, so clearly he wasn't able to move tickets. Which is again, no shame. There's no shame in not being able to sell tickets. I'm sure all of you guys in the chat have tried to put together a birthday party for yourself, where you try to invite some friends to come and have some drinks at your birthday party, even if you're the one paying. You know how difficult it is to get your friends to come to a bar to have drinks with you. It's not easy to get people to come out of their house and spend some money or put on an outfit and go somewhere. It's not easy. Like anybody that can sell tickets, even to 100 people, even to 50, 20, you're doing well. Like well done. Don't let this guy kind of diminish you or make you feel like you're not doing anything because you're just coming up in comedy and you're not selling as many tickets. No one does. You have to get to a point of those Rogans and Delias and Chappelle's and shit and Bill Burrs to sell big tickets. No one sells tickets. So cool. But the fact that he made such a big point about it, and then clearly he's not selling tickets, obviously, because he's not doing comedy the right way, so he doesn't really have a fan base, and who cares outside of the main markets that he has. That's why he got what he got in it. It is what it is. But yeah, that end bit was brutal. But if you thought the end bit was brutal, the second part is even worse. That's where Ariel really got in his bag. He really got in his bag and he was like, you know what? I've had enough of this guy. Let's go. Part 2 of Ariel response to Brendan Schaub. This is going to be a big one. Should I say pause and say a big one, or should I leave it out there? Should I say pause? No, it's going to be a big one. I'm sure Ariel's got a big one.
Now, there were a couple pot shots at me that I must address. The jobs. How many jobs have you been fired from? How many jobs have you had? Again, I wish he would just at me. I wish he would just, say my name directly. But, I don't know. Maybe Helwani is too tough to say in a soliloquy like that. Let's correct the record. I've only been fired from one official job, and that was the Fox job. You know what happened there. You know that had nothing to do with me. You know they paid me for the rest of the year. And you know the reason why I was let go was because the UFC told them to let me go. Now, you could bring up the Showtime gig as well. That was a 3-day gig. It was a 1-week gig. They paid me out as well. And that, again, was because of the UFC. Other than that, I have stood the test of time. And if you want to call up Bristol, Connecticut right now and ask them about the contract they offered me, go ahead. I was not fired. Now let's talk about you. College football, how'd that go? How'd NFL go? How did fighting go? How did comedy go? How did podcasting go? How did TV go? Did you achieve your goals? Did you realize your dreams? Did you make it to the top? Was your claim to fame being told by your friend that it was time to move on and it was a great moment? I mean, we talked about it on this show. He put you over. You were the biggest baby face in the biz. You had it. Silver platter. You had it. You were going after everyone. You were on this show, that show. You were the guy, the truth teller. But how did those gigs go? And how are they going now? Don't talk about other people's jobs. Again, you do this fake gimmick where you're like, oh, holier than thou. I just sit back and I stay in my lane. I don't read anything. You do that whole gimmick. Meanwhile, you read everything.
And I get Ariel's frustration here because you can see the real contempt coming out of him now. I understand, right? There's nothing more annoying in life, I think, especially as a man, because I don't think we communicate and we kind of disagree like this, but there's nothing more annoying than another guy that's like passive aggressive or another guy that like throws the insults and then hides his hands. There's nothing more annoying by it. Usually, especially if you're in a workplace and you have a disagreement with somebody, it's usually because you just don't get along, right? And you just decide to like keep out of each other's way. But how annoying is it when there's somebody in your group who kind of just says stuff about you behind to someone else behind your back? You go and confront them, they kind of play dumb, they kind of gaslight you for even saying it, or they try and manipulate you into believing that guy who said it to you was obviously saying nothing. Like that's annoying. So I get why Ariel's annoyed because in this whole entire thing, Brendan's been trying to paint it as if like he's the professional higher up one, and Ariel's the one that's kind of scrapping and looking for his attention and trying to cause drama for drama's sake. It's like, no, 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 no. You're just as petty as I am. Stop pretending. And then he's kind of laid it out in public. But the bit at the beginning about the shows and the TV deals and all this sort of stuff is like, that was a brutal bit because that's the bit I forgot about. Because if you guys remember, OG Brendan back in the day when he was first kind of getting his start and seeing all the bright lights and moving to LA and hanging out and doing his thing with the Mexican, right? This is when Brendan was like everywhere, and I think he was trying to go. Remember, he was trying to be a presenter. That's when he dyed his hair white, and he was trying to do that whole like E thing. That's when he was trying to pretend like he was. And do you remember when Brendan used to pretend he was into fashion? Because he likes trainers. That's one of the worst things I've seen in my life. Like, again, like as somebody that's into fashion, right? Somebody that went to a fashion school and somebody who collects fashion magazines, who watches fashion shows, to see somebody like a Brendan say he's into fashion because he likes to wear hype beast kicks is just nonsense. But anyway, that was that era, right? When he was going on E, he was doing that E show. I forgot what that E show was, where he was like, they would comment on like, it was, what show was it? It was like a kind of like it was like a panel discussion kind of show thing. They sat in a little circle. There'd be topical events or topical stories, and then they'd kind of riff off them. And obviously, Brendan was terrible at it, even with editing. Right, those shows I think you film for like the whole day, and then they cut it up into like some of your best bits, and you just keep bouncing off each other. So if you're somebody who's got great comedic chops on those sort of platforms, you can kind of come into your own, especially if you're trying to cross over to the other side and become a little bit commercial. That could be a good opportunity to show like that I can do the edgy kind of stuff that I do on stage, and I can also do this kind of really obvious mainstreamy sort of stuff. And obviously he was terrible at it, right? It didn't really work out. Most of those things are meritocracy, right? Meritocracy, in that you can get into the door with connections, but you can't stay and have a job just through your connections alone. You can't. It's just impossible. So maybe Brendan got in that way, and then as in he couldn't hang around. And yeah, that's like, well, yeah, exactly, the turtleneck. He knows, Wade Harris knows the turtleneck era when you're trying to present on red carpets and shit. And again, if somebody like him was actually the real deal, it would be an amazing gig, right? It would be this ex-UFC guy, super tall, super handsome, funny off the cuff, into weird stuff, like he's into fashion and likes serial killer documentaries and shit. It would be quite a good angle. But because it was all fake, it was all kind of a caricature, right? He was just pretending to be this guy so he could get himself in the industry. When he really needed talent to kind of back him up, it was never there, which is why they always say faking it until you make it is always a bad idea in the long run. You should fake it until you make it if you've actually got an ability, if you've actually got the talent, if you actually got something, right, in you. And X Factor, je ne sais quoi, you're just waiting for the opportunity. But if you fake it until you make it with no talent, eventually you'll get caught out. Eventually you will. Like, I remember my parents who used to say it to me growing up, whatever's done in the dark will always come to light. And it used to annoy me. It could make me furious because I always felt like they were kind of speaking to me about things that I'm doing. But they were right. Right? Everything you do in the dark does come to light, and there's only so long you can fool people. And you can only fool them maybe sometimes, not all the time. And how much longer can you keep that kind of charade up? So he destroyed him there.
You're affected by everything, and then you throw these pot shots. Those who live in glass houses should not throw any kind of stone, ever. And right now, that glass house is, it is right there. Wherever that, it is sitting right there. Don't talk about people's jobs. That's how we got into this mess. Don't talk about people's livelihoods. When you don't know, again, you keep doubling down. You'll text me and you'll apologize, and then you'll keep talking about it again. And so the bottom line is, tired of people like you spitting lies, BSing us all, pretending like you know what you're talking about. There's a reason I never spoke about you for 5-6 years. I never responded to you. I don't need to. You talk about how I need to have 17 guests or so on my show. First of all, 5 today, and they were great. 6 if you count Pitbull. I love talking to these people. There's a reason why when I went to ESPN, they wanted to do Ariel and the Bad Guy in DC and Helwani, and actually the biggest point of contention between us was that I wanted to talk to too many people. If you look at the YouTube numbers on the nose, this segment does better than most of the fighters. But I love talking to the fighters. It's all about the fighters. It will always be about the fighters. So you can make fun all you want that I get 17 guests on my show, that I need these guests to get over, to get views, and that, oh, if we talk about you, that's how we get. I never uttered your name. I never said a word about you. You're the one who keeps talking about us. You're the one who keeps sitting there looking at the websites when your boy pulls them up and talking about us. And then you steal our ideas and our content. You do it to Luke. You do it to Brian. You do it to me. You do it to everyone. You steal our ideas and you sit there and you pass them off as your own, and you even botch it when you do it. You botch it when you do it every single time. You sit there and you rip off our ideas. It's plagiarism 101.
That was the brutalist. That was legitimately the brutalist. Because I don't know about you guys, but I've been in schools where there was that kind of the bully, aggressive guy that would pay people to do his homework and to do his essays and shit, right? And usually the better ones were kind of, they treat their geeks and their nerds who they're kind of helping, who's helping to write those things for them. They treat them well. But usually, if someone would ask them, hey, did you write that essay that you got a good mark on? They'll say, of course not. That guy did it for me. Why would they take credit for something that they clearly know they didn't do? There's not going to earn any clout. I didn't do that. I paid that guy to do it for me. I'm not an idiot. I was in the gym lifting weights. So it was always funny to me whenever, I think, because at the time, if you guys remember, I don't know if it's changed now. No, it definitely has changed now because Luke Thomas has gone over to do the other show, Morning Combat with BC, and I think they do it on another day. But before, when Luke Thomas was doing his own show, he would film it a day before or something. I think Brendan would do Below the Belt, or maybe 2 days before. So it was always funny. Again, this is something that's pointed out again. Big up the homeless cats, because I didn't believe it at first. I thought they were just like, trolling. But the homeless cats caught it ages ago. They caught the fact that whenever Luke Thomas would record first, if Brendan recorded second, his opinions and points would usually mirror what Luke Thomas said or in response to what Luke Thomas said. Which basically means he wasn't actually analyzing the stories and reading them through and trying to come up with his own interesting hot takes and maybe, using some of his contacts to glean some other bits of insight that no one else has probably got, that are privy to. He just would listen to what Luke Thomas said because he researched it quite well and then just respond or riff off of that. That was it. So I completely understand why a lot of those gay people getting upset, because it wasn't even like he was using those guys as a launching point to kind of go off what they said and said, oh, by the way, I was listening to Luke Thomas's show and he said this, and you know how Luke, he didn't even do that. He would just be talking as if like that was his own original thought. And it's like, huh? Like, you can't just do that. Do you know what I mean? And no one said nothing again because of his relationship with Joe Rogan. And that's the weird thing about this whole situation. It's like Joe Rogan's relationship with him has somehow inoculated him from any kind of real life responses or feedback or criticism, which is odd too, because Joe Rogan doesn't really hold any, I don't say clout, but he doesn't really hold much weight in MMA media in that regard. But he's such a beast. He's such a big influence. He casts such a wide and large shadow that people just don't want to upset any of his friends, which explains why a lot of those people have some of the more divided fan bases online and stuff. But god damn it, man.
Except you're not writing anything, you're saying it. And it's harder to catch that way. But trust me, we're all onto you. You sit there and you talk about Tyson Fury being your favorite fighter, and then you say that you want to slit your wrist when you hear about mental health in Tyson Fury. You truly love Tyson Fury, you fake phony. You care about his struggles with mental health.
He wanted to say
So you
fake
could
fuck
say
so
all that you
badly.
want about the 17 guests. You could say all that you want about the fighters. I love talking to the fighters. I will always love talking about the fighters. And at least I don't pay them to come on my show. At least I don't have to pay them to come hang out and eat a taco with me. And at least I don't have them say, hey, you got to do this show if you want to do this show. You know what I'm talking about. If
Yo, 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 yo. Now, that point was the time when I thought, okay, Ariel Helwani is choosing violence today. He has chose violence, violence, violence today. Oh my God. Now, maybe I'm naive, right? Maybe I'm naive. No, let's take a step back before. Does anybody else have a point of... is anybody else annoyed or upset or pissed off? No, it's not even a good word to use. Does it annoy anybody else? Yeah, I'd say annoy. That Ariel Helwani has loads of guests on his show. I always thought it made sense because it was quite a long show and there was different segments and different people were fighting on the following week and maybe different sort of news stories. I never really saw it as a big deal. They had all these people on the show. I didn't think of it as a way to get views. I just thought it was a good indication, representation of how he's regarded in the industry, that all these people who may have problems within each other are the ones now coming up and wanting to speak to him on his platform. That's how I saw it. But Brendan sees it as like him trying to game the system and game the numbers by having all these names in the titles. It's like, no, not really. I just thought it was a good way to kind of get your news all in one place from these guys and hear it from the horse's mouth. And also, Ariel's going to ask some interesting questions, right? That's what I thought. I never really thought the 17 guest thing was a big issue. Now, the other point he made about Brendan paying for guests on on Food Truck Diaries, that is the one that caught me off guard. I'm like, wow, I didn't know that he did that. I'm surprised too. And again, it's incredibly embarrassing. Maybe the most embarrassing thing to come out of this entire rant or this entire roast or this entire evisceration from Ariel to Brendan is the fact that now it's been revealed, allegedly, we don't know if it's true, don't want to get sued or anything, but allegedly it's been revealed that Brendan is paying guests to go on Food Truck Diaries. And you know what's really sad about this is that Brendan's a former UFC fighter, right? Say what you want about the guy. He was professional UFC fighter for a period of time. He was a top ranked, 15 heavyweight. He was well known, even though he wasn't very good. He was still well known. He was one of those weird ones who kind of was, had a bit of name recognition behind him. Maybe because relationship with Ronda Rousey. I don't know what happened there, but instead it doesn't really matter. And you would imagine from his experience training everywhere, because again he's a heavyweight, so more likely when you're a heavyweight you go and train with loads of different gyms because there's not a lot of heavyweights around. You go and spar with people, right? People. You get into the scene really quickly, engrossed, especially with his kind of personality. People will end up liking you because you seem funny and shit. So for him to be that guy and have to pay people to come on his show and not have the ability to kind of, curry favors, or just off the strength of just a friendship or like a little brotherhood, like a brotherhood from being in the UFC, you'd think there'd be a lot more of that going around, but no, they're like, pay me and then I'll come on your show. Insane. And it also maybe explains why, again, big up the homeless cats, that subreddit, they knew, man. They were saying that it was at a time, because I don't know how it got leaked, but it got leaked that, Brendan makes people sign NDAs. Maybe it might be when Malik left, something happened. And we found out that, oh yeah, he likes people to sign the NDAs. And this might be the reason why there's so many NDAs around Brendan Schaub and his whole production. And what he does walking around, like, you record podcasts, why are people signing NDAs? And I guess now we know why, because of these other things that are going on. T-Fat-K is the Fire and the Kid Anvil. That's a subreddit that everyone goes on where they rip Brendan to pieces, basically. Not much Brian Callen. Brian Callen kind of gets away with murder on there, but, I think he kind of plays it safe. But yeah, man, I don't know. Like, I'm shocked that honestly, I'm really legitimately shocked that Brendan has to pay guests to get on Food Truck Diaries. And what makes it even worse, what makes the thing even worse, Food Truck Diaries is easily Brendan's best thing. Brendan's best, like, kind of produced original piece of content he's basically put together. Definitely the best. Especially when you think that he's not a foodie really. He doesn't really strike me as somebody that has a real good culinary palate or whatever it may be. But he was still able to get people to care enough to watch a show with him, mostly him, doing that weird thing that he does where he sticks out his tongue with before he eats something. He's like, it's the most bizarre way of eating I've ever seen in my life. It's obviously redacted. Don't want to say that word, I don't want to get demonetized. But you know it is, right? And now that show's gone to shit because guess what? Instead of using the whole premise around it where they kind of rock up and they order some food from a food truck, they have that kind of weird, I don't know what to order thing. Maybe it's a language barrier with the person that's owning it because, whatever it may be. And then they kind of sit the other side of the street and munch on a taco or, some ribs or whatever it may be. Shoot the shit, talk about UFC, maybe get a bit funny and fuck around. And then they go on their merry way. Now he's moved the show and changed it, and now he has the food eating part in his office or in his new studio he's got. Like, what? What's the point of having a food truck diary if you're going to be in an office space, if you're in a studio? It doesn't make any sense. The whole point of that show, why it's good, is because you're outdoors, you're walking around. Maybe some fans might come along and say, "Hey, Brendan, what's up, man? The fight." You know what I mean? That's what makes it interesting. And he's even turned that show into shit. It's like, come on, dude.
If you want to shoot, we'll shoot. Stop talking about things when you're living in a glass house and you have no idea what is going on. If the knock that you have against me is that I have 17 guests on the show when I don't, but I have fighters on the show, big names, small names, middle names, medium names, God bless. But at least I don't pay them to come on, and at least I don't try to cut deals from one show to the next. And in conclusion, I'll just say, and this is a shout out to my friends over on the internet, the PF Chang's community, the homeless cat community. And this is a message to everyone in the back over there. This is a message to any friend I have, to any family member I have, to any colleague that I have, to any associate that I have. If it ever gets to the point where I am big enough to where there is a Reddit page, any kind of web page, made in my honor to celebrate my show, where they only talk about the podcast, if it ever gets to that point, congratulate me. But please, do me a favor. Please, bottom of the heart, do me this favor. If it ever gets to that point where there's 40,000 or so people whose sole mission is to expose you and to call you out on your BS, please tell me to stop. Your own community turned on you. Your own community figured you out. And we know you're rattled by it. And I'm not a proponent of online bullying. But dare I say you brought this onto yourself, my man.
You brought this onto yourself, Papa. That was the evisceration. Papa got buried. Because that's the truth. And that is honestly the bit that really I don't understand. I don't get. How do you go again? Maybe people in the chat are going to be different, but I was actually a fan of Fire and Kid. I loved it earlier on when it was first starting. When Evan the Beard was on, MJ and shit, during the Fox days, right? It was sick. I loved it. I thought it was really one of the more legitimately funny LA-based podcasts, because usually people would say the New York or the East Coast ones are funnier. They try and riff off each other. They're obviously trying to one-up each other all the time in terms of jokes and be the most offensive and all this sort of shit. But I legitimately thought the Fire and the Kid at the time, during that, especially the early Fox days, that was peak good Fire and the Kid. And then, of course, when they progressed and they started to get Will Sasso and, early Fear of Warner appearances and Chris D'Elia appearances, they were awesome too. But I thought that magic era was still that Fox era, right? So it was really good. So this subreddit gets created in a way to obviously celebrate the show, talk about the show, and of course, poke fun. But for the most part, if I remember early days of the subreddit, it was always, we're going to talk about how good the show was, share some clips how funny it was, and then laugh at how Brendan mispronounces things or the dumb shit he says in general, right? That was all it was. And then for whatever reason, somewhere along the line, Brendan turned everyone off completely. And again, it's not even Brian. Brian's the one that got accused of fucking, R-wording somebody, right? So you'd think he'd be the one everyone hated, but people had just forgotten about that and moved on. There's a whole trail of victims for Brian Callen's alleged crimes out there, right? Women who are still kind of nervous about leaving change rooms and shit. And anyway, it doesn't matter. Let's move on. But you'd think in it, right, that Brian would be the one who'd kind of turn everyone off the show, but it wasn't him. it was Brendan basically over time becoming more successful, getting more money, going on bigger tours, selling out bigger places, and going on Joe Rogan. I don't know what that record was on that year, maybe like 30 times. That turned everyone off, and that made everyone on that subreddit that was meant to celebrate the show into a detractor, into a homeless cat, into a hater, as Brendan Schaub likes to say. Like, that was the moment. And I think recently, another pivotal moment in like Brendan or Brad or the Fire and the Kid kind of downfall was definitely that period just before COVID, when Brendan and Brian were doing that weird pseudoscience shit and talking about how ineffective all these measures were, just kind of really, really amping it up. And I think at the time as well, most of that was coming from their own insecurities, because they were seeing their main cash cow and their ability to go out on the road and, you know, basically fuck random women was going to disappear. So they got really nervous, right? Which I can understand. But then they tried to spin it and use that nervousness to talk about them being skeptical about vaccines and, you know, what's it called, lockdowns and stuff, all these really weird shit. And I think that turned a lot of people off. I legitimately think that's when they lost a lot of people. And of course, when they eventually got COVID, and the way Brendan kind of, you know, dealt with it and how he acted and things that he said, the contempt he had for people, it just made everything worse. And I think that's what kind of led to this situation we're in at the moment. And of course, that, because, you know, think about it, that led to maybe his Showtime deal maybe getting rescinded or not being topped up. Loads of things happened off the back of that thing that I think inadvertently were caused by, you know, their kind of weird stance on flipping COVID and shit. But hey,
You brought this upon yourself. One more time. Stop talking about me. Stop with the fake apologies. You did it well the last couple of weeks. You didn't bring it up. You stayed in your lane. You were in the storm. We were reporting on the storm. Better that way. Joe Rogan doesn't need you to fight his battles. Do your thing. God bless. Stay in your lane. Do your shows. I wish you nothing but the best. But stop talking about me and the MMA media. Stop lying about the business, people's jobs, the fighters. Stop all of that. And again, I'll say I'm done. Until the next time. Unless you want to just apologize once and for all on the air, like you said you were going to do, like you promised me that you were going to do, like Brian Callen said he was going to do and never did. If you guys want to do that, then that would be great. And I would be here to accept said apology. And so to go back to the original question, why I posted that screenshot. F Brendan Schaub. F the fighter and the kid. F below the belt. F that whole crew. And if you do want to be down with them, then F you too. Brian Callen, F you too. Shrimp, F you too. Dude in the back with the websites, F you too. When I see them, they run. Okay, now I won't stop with the analogies, but you get the point. F all those guys. I'm done with them. Again. Once and for all, stop talking about us. We are done. And so that's my piece on that.
yo, that was fantastic. Chef's kiss, mate. Honestly, chef's kiss. Chef's kiss. You put him in a body bag, man. You put him in a body bag, put him in the back of his boot, drove to the highest mountain, backed it out, flung it off, parasailed down, caught it, ran up a hill somewhere into a volcano, chucked it in there, eviscerated it, gathered the ashes, put it in the urn, ran down the motorway somewhere, rolled it down a really, really long hill. It skied off into the air, and someone headed it into the ground. Like, that was what you call being buried. Legitimately, that's what you call being buried. Oh my goody gosh. He said fuck everybody. He said the best bit I like was that Chin one. Was that fuck the guy in the back that does all the papers and shit, all the websites. He didn't even mention his name. And Chin's got the most easiest name out of all of them, right? Chin or Shrimp, right? He just said, yeah, the guy in the back that does all the papers and the news. What did he say? What exactly he said? Something about the guy in the back. That doesn't matter. But, you know, yeah. Everyone was catching strays, man. Everyone caught. The only person he was quite respectful of and didn't mention at all was Brian Callen. And that's because Brian apologized, right? Brian reached out. He said sorry in the pod. He didn't want no more smoke. He didn't want anyone mentioning that, you know, he might have a couple R words, allegations on his name still. He wants to move on and just do movies again and, you know, and go on the road. He doesn't want any trouble. He doesn't want no smoke. So Ariel respected his wishes and just kept it moving. I like that from Ariel. Very, very classy. Very, very, very classy. But honestly, that was brutal to watch. That was brutal to listen to the first time, and even brutal to listen to again the second time because I was picking up on certain things I didn't pick up from before. Absolutely insane. The thing that I think he said about I don't get the thing about cutting deals. He said something about at least I don't have to pay for my my fighters to come on my show, and obviously you're cutting deals and something like that to go on other shows. I don't know what that means. Is he trying to insinuate that Brendan? Because from what I know, Brendan only has the one show, right? Below the Belt and and Food Truck Diaries are kind of MMA centric, right? And he only has guests on one, which is Food Truck. So I don't know what the cutting deals thing was about. Did he mean that Brendan has links or connections to other shows so that if they do his show, he'll recommend them to another show? Is that what he meant? Like, I didn't get the whole cutting deals thing, but honestly, he destroyed him. And, you know, there's one more clip to go. One more clip that I thought was really, really powerful and probably maybe the best of all of them was right at the end. Right at the end, I think it might be the best clip of them all. And again, big up the homeless cats, big up the Fire and the Kids subreddit. That place is going to be jumping this next couple of days, actually, regardless of what happens. Because, you know, most likely than not, Brendan's probably not going to reply to this because, you know, it doesn't really serve him well to reply to it. It doesn't really have anything interesting, nuanced, or funny to say anything. Because that's the thing with this sort of stuff. When somebody's ripping you this hard and it's all home truths, you're just going to have to get really funny. Right? You can't get super insultive. You can't get super insulting because it just makes you sound salty, right? For lack of a better term. So you just have to go straight funny, like straight laugh a minute funny. Just start going, yeah, but your dad looks like a gerbil or something. Do you know what I mean? Or whatever, right? You have to go straight, or your uncle, who's Scat dad, right? You have to go and stuff like that. Yeah, you just have to go straight in. You can't, you know, give his kind of half-baked, aggressive sort of like replies that he does. Anyway, but this is the final one. Final clip, and this is Ariel right at the end of the show on his show MMA Hour. Definitely go check it out. Give him some views as well, because I think I should just play it from his YouTube channel. My bad, because the clips are already available on the Fire and the Kids. So try and find his channel yourself, and obviously give him some views, give him some love, give him some attention, smash his like and all that good stuff. But yeah, this is Ariel's final response right at the end, right? This is his final kind of dagger. This is when you know Ariel was on pure smoke and just had enough of Brendan. This is his final thing. After everything he said, this is the final thing he said. And I think this is the most savage of them all.
It feels good to be real. It feels good to be honest. It feels good to say, look, I got nothing to be ashamed of. I'm not a liar. I don't make up things about people. I don't look down on people. Remember these people. They look down on you. They are not your equal in their minds. You're better than all of them. But remember that. They look down on you. They think they're better than you because you haven't walked the fire. You haven't been in the flames. Get out of here with that nonsense. Get out of here with that nonsense. And if you were smart, you would leave the comedy bits to the comedians. And if you were smart, you would leave the MMA talk to the actual people who care about the sport, who love the sport, who actually watch the fights. Go do the other stuff. Go do the 50-seat amphitheater that you do. Go do the little comedy club. Go do the 2-for-1 specials.
Jesus Christ.
No one will miss you because no one wants that negativity. Your fake positivity, which is really negativity, no one wants that in their lives. Stop talking about us. Done. Once and for all. Can we end this right now? Can we end this right now? Are we done?
Yo. That bit I think might have been the most savage bit. This might have been the most savage section of them all. Let's do it one more
If you
time.
were smart, you would leave the MMA talk to the actual people who care about the sport, leave the comedy bits to the comedians. And if you were smart, you would leave the MMA talk to the actual people who care about the sport, who love the sport, who actually watch the fights. Go do the other stuff. Go do the 50-seat amphitheater that you do. Go do the little comedy club. Go do the 2-for-1 specials. No one will miss you because no one wants that negativity. Your fake positivity, which is really negativity, no one wants that in their lives. Stop talking about us. Done. Once and for all. Can we end this right now? Can we end this right now? Are we done?
I'm Brendan. I'm done. I'm done. Yo, I think I'm done. If I'm Brendan, I'm done. I'm done. Put your hands up. Put your hands up. Put your hands to the sky and just say I'm finished. No mas. No mas. No mas. Like, that'll be like when look, yeah. Let's go back to what you said there about leave the comedy bits to the comedy bits. Now I might be in a minority here again. I think I'm trying to be fair because I don't really care too much, right, about all this shit. I just think it's funny to watch. I think everyone's got their pros and cons, but I just think it's funny to see somebody who quite clearly thinks a lot of themselves and doesn't feel like anybody can say anything to them get eviscerated by somebody who they think is they're above, right, or they think is below them. That's always funny. It's always interesting to see. But I've been one of the only people who've said, and I stand by this, right, that I think for all Brendan's faults, the one thing that you can say he's really good at, and something that he's actually been able to show evidence that he's been able to replicate success of, from taking a show from zero to something and, do it in many different ways, especially during all the controversies and stuff, is podcasting. No one can say that he's not good at creating online content, video content, stuff on social media, and obviously doing real podcasting. He's good at that. He's really, really good at that. And obviously, I think that's the main reason why he was able to use that success to parlay into him selling tickets to go and do comedy, right? Because people are curious to see, like this guy that we've seen in the podcast we think is funny is now going to do stand-up comedy, right? So yeah, let's go check this out. And of course, over time, you realize he's pretty shit, and whoever goes now. But regardless, no problem. I always thought it didn't really make any sense why he decided to do stand-up in the first place, or to try and do the whole MMA thing, because it's quite clear with the MMA thing specifically, he's fallen out of love with the sport. He doesn't love it anymore, right? Which makes sense because he retired. So if somebody can tell you to retire, that means you probably don't love the sport, right? Because most MMA fighters, if you'd suggest the thought of retiring to them, they'll snap your neck in two in it because they love fighting. They love the art of MMA. They love everything about it. Doesn't matter if they're not getting paid well by Dana. They don't care. They just want to fight. So the fact that he was able to decide to quit so quickly after Joe Rogan sat him down is an indication that his heart was never in it anyway. He said it himself. He said himself MMA wasn't for him. His heart wasn't in it. He was going to do other things. You do your other thing. Why then go back into MMA and try and do like shows where you have to kind of analyze fights and all this sort of stuff? Because he clearly doesn't like to do so. He doesn't enjoy talking about fights with people that aren't in MMA world, right? Every time Brian talks about fights and accurately, and getting the irony, Brian's actual analysis, Brian Callen's analysis of the fights and breakdowns and, why he decided to pick a certain fighter are far more nuanced, are far more detailed and researched and have a lot more depth to them than what Brendan does. So he doesn't like talking to MMA about people. He doesn't like watching it around people. He doesn't like going to live shows to see the MMA. He clearly doesn't love the thing anymore. So why do it? Because it's going to turn into a chore, which is what it feels like when you watch the Below the Belt sometimes. He doesn't research anything. He reads the flipping cards off of flipping Wikipedia. Do you know what I mean? Like, just zero effort. And again, it'll be okay if you're a zero effort and you're like a Josh Thompson, zero effort and you're like a GSP, zero effort, you're like a Bisbing, zero effort, and you're like a Felder, right? These guys are clearly just lovers of the game anyway, so I'm pretty sure if you just pulled him out of the bed in half in middle of the night, Bisbing will be able to give you a pretty good deep breakdown of like an up and coming card, of course, right? Because he just loves the game, right? So he can't do that. So this is why Below the Belt I thought was always going to be doomed to failure. Then the comedy thing, I'm not sure about you guys, but I think it's impossible near on to just go from being a dude that's never been funny to then try and be funny on stage. Because a lot of people say, you hear a lot of stand-up comedians say, oh, when I was in school, I was always voted the most funniest, or I was always voted the person that was going to be an entertainer the most. So there was always indication when they were younger that they were always going to be the class, either you're the class clown or you get voted certain things. It gives you an indication, and how you're regarded around your friend group when you're out. Is everyone around you laughing? There's a little indication that okay, I'm a funny guy, I'm a humorous dude, I'm a humorous girl. So it's not much of a stretch for you to go from being that funny person person in your friendship group to trying to work out why your friends laughing, getting bits together and then going on a road. Maybe it might not be for you, but there's evidence to show it. But I think it's really impossible to get a guy that's just like an IT dude, a guy that's just working in a bar, just chilling, not doing anything, not funny or nothing, just works a job and goes home, to then try to get him to become a touring comic or something. It's just not going to happen. And especially in your mid-30s. So for Brendan to go and do that as a first thing just seemed idiotic. Especially because I said before, I think he's really talented and really amazing at putting together podcasts. Quite clearly, he's shown that he could do it. So why not just take the talent of making shows and podcasts, double down on it, triple down on that, make loads more like that Thick Boy Studios things he's been doing now. He should have done that ages ago. Do that, right? Build it out, fire the Kid Studios, doesn't matter what it may be. And then use those shows to do live shows so you can then make some extra money. And, you know, he likes to cash out. You could do much stuff with that as well, no problem. But then you have to, you can avoid doing the whole stand-up thing because he was never going to do stand-up the right way, right? That's the issue. And we had the indication was it would have been the Showtime deal. The moment he took that Showtime money, because obviously he took it because he wanted to get in with Showtime so he could do other Showtime bits. So it's a smart move looking back on it anyway. Even though it's not ended well, he still got the opportunity to get some checks from Showtime to do his shows, A Letter Fire and the Kid. No, sorry, A Letter Food Truck Diaries. So all in all, it's really worked out well for him in that regard. But stand-up he was never going to do seriously. He was never going to do seriously. He was never going to go do open mics. He was never going to go on tour. He's never going to do triple runs. All these sort of things that people say really adds to your kind of experience, really kind of helps you hone your craft. He was never going to do it because he doesn't need to. And now I think he says in the show himself, right? He only plays in front of his own audience, right? He does. So these weekend shows he does are like quoted as tours, or they're not really, just performing at a couple of places in that city. But he goes on tour, performs in front of his own fans, and just comes back home, right? That's basically it. But he doesn't do any other kind of stuff that other comedians would do, where you basically tour the country with material that, you know, you're trying to work out in places that people don't know you, in an effort to kind of get better at telling jokes to strangers. So I just don't understand it. I really don't. He could have been super successful just doing like I said, the podcasting thing, doubling down and having the whole studio set up, having loads of people do shows under his network maybe, and then doing live shows off the back of that, selling merch off the back of that. Like, that could have been the easy way to do things. But again, now he's got one of the worst rated specials on IMDb. People hate him all over the place, but I just have to give Ariel Helwani credit, man. He stood up for himself. He stood up for himself in a very respectful way. He attacked all of Brendan's points in a really clear and logical way. And at the end, he also exposed quite clearly Brendan to be the guy that we all knew he was. Do you know what I mean? And again, the problem is, at this moment in time, he's too old to change. I'm not a big believer in people just changing their personality overnight, because I think he's turned into this person, this animal. Because I was a fan of the Fire and the Kid beforehand, especially during the Fox days. This version of Brendan is never going to go back to that version of Brendan. They're two different people. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's made too much money, he's been too successful, he's seen too many things, he's been in too many rooms for him to listen to anything someone like me would say, or someone like Ariel or Helwani say. It's not gonna, why would he listen to that? Like, we are peons, you know what I mean? We are, the gum that's at the bottom of his shoe. So he's always going to suffer. And the thing, again, like I said, the funny thing about it is that he always tries to go on as if like he doesn't read comments, doesn't do this, doesn't do that. But it's clearly affecting him, which it should do. Right? If there are 40,000 people on a subreddit, like as Ariel said, with their sole intention purposes is to make sure they take you down and reveal you to be a fraud, you should be feeling worried. You should be feeling a little bit scared. It should be a thing. So I'm not surprised that he's feeling that way. But yeah, man, that was the roast, and that was the destruction of Ariel Helwani to Brendan. I'm not expecting a response. I don't think so. There's nothing he can say, man. Like I said, he needs to be funny. He needs to be witty. He needs to be brutal. And he doesn't really have any of those ingredients to make it a worthwhile response. The only thing he's done well rebuttal-wise was that, remember that note he uploaded about Dana White when he said something about snow bunnies? That's the only time he's really burned somebody really well. If you watched old Sting and the King, when they used to really go back and forth with each other, now I think they've kind of, maybe Brendan had a word and he said to Theo his feelings, but Brendan's not really good off the cuff like that. So he's fucked in it, really. He's gonna have to just let this one lie, take the L, and just keep it moving. But Jesus, man, Ariel Helwani destroyed and ripped Brendan to pieces there. But yeah, that's me for now. It's getting super late here in the UK, so if it's you're watching still and you're here live, thank you once again for tuning in. I really appreciate you for taking your time out of your day to hear me ranting and raving with this flipping horrible light peeking in the back and with my shitty background, but it is what it is. We're chilling. Thanks again for checking me out. And if it's the first time checking out the show, make sure you smash that like for me. And if I've earned your subscribe for your first time being on the channel, then click that subscribe for me. I'm not expecting a reply, so if there is a reply, of course I'll do another live stream. If there isn't going to be a reply, then I think this is a good way to end it. This is a good way to kind of say, you know what, we've crowned a new CEO of PF Chang's. We've also got somebody very noteworthy saying everything that we've been thinking about secretly behind closed doors or on certain parts of the internet. Big up the homeless cats. Now we're in a place where it's all come out in the wash. We've all seen what the deal is. It is what it is. The game is the game. You know what I mean? Phonies are going to phony. But now we all know they're going to phony. It's like DSP, right? Dark Side Phil. Dark Side Phil, bank leaks come out. It exposes that he isn't in as much dire straits as he likes to add on, or likes to kind of go on about. It also shows that all the tips money and the money he gets in general from all his streaming goes to all those gacha games and WWE champions and, you know, eating out and all that sort of stuff. And even though he's still begging for tips now, DSP, we know. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's what hurts people like that the most. Even though Brendan was going to go on and be fine, you'd do okay. We know. And the fact that we know is going to be enough to kind of really eat away at him little by little. So I think that's a good thing in terms of if you're looking for some karmic restitution. Fair play, no problem. Oh man, what a great day to be alive. But yeah, big up everybody. Big up everybody. Hope you are well wherever you are. Let me quickly just check over the comments, see what everyone said. Don't want to miss anything here before I duck. But let's go back to this. What I miss here? I don't know why it's umbrella emojis. Yeah, I said big gay line, FU2. Yeah, you're like a legend. The best roast of the year. Someone said here, poor Chin, he's innocent in all this. Yeah, he is. The perfect dismount. And no, he didn't. Bagged and tagged, of course. Love your commentary. Thank you, mate. Quinn Taylor. Now he said F. Brian. Sure. Oh, he did say F. Brian. Okay. Schaub is too dumb and boring to listen to as a background noise to take a shit to. I tried to listen to his recent podcast about Fury, and he screwed up the names and he was all over the place. Yeah, the Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury fight analysis or preview that he did was just wild because I saw a clip of it on the subreddit. Deontay Wilder's name's pretty, easy to remember, and I think didn't have an interview with Schaub. I don't know, whatever, right? Tyson Fury is Tyson Fury. So to get those names mixed up was just like, over Joe Rogan did, Schaub did, whiskey sponsors, CBD comedy. Josh Burke says Schaub. Josh Burke says whiskey. Marty Moose says he was paying fighters to appear on Food Truck Diaries, understanding they'll appear on other shows. Okay, yeah, cool, that makes sense. Even Texas at one point. He's saying Brendan Schaub pays people to Food Diaries and tries to get them to do other podcasts he likes. He probably claims he'll put them on good word. Chin is going to have an New York Times bestseller. He leads the fucking dumbass, true. Schaub may have become reasonable college player, but it always seems like he's trying to talk up his game. Sucks to him, but he doesn't seem to be exceptional at anything. He always says, I don't know, I don't pay attention. T-Fat Cable of the Bell, Iconic Brendan, first time here, Agostinho, funny stuff, enjoy the content, I agree with you, thank you so much, Dusty Cole, Gunhand Helwani for sure, good show, thank you Neil, I appreciate you my friend, Truth, Ariel the Preacher, Wrestling Podcasters, and since Rogan had left, here platform is now growing, do you think it was planned? Since Rogan has left the platform and now, I don't really think it was planned, I just think it was a coincidence personally. I don't think it was a plan though. Who actually watched the fight? Right? Rogan is a smart dude. We get it. You're not racist. Yo, that we get it, you're not racist thing was hilarious, isn't it? Right? That was a great sign, or another indication, another example of Brendan actually being more of a hater than actually what he lets on. He complains about everybody else, but he's actually just as much as a hater as everybody else. Because that whole rant was like so uncalled for and so unnecessary, um, and so rude and so dripping in like casual racism, right? That's what it was dripping in, not racism, racism. That's what it was dripping in. Like he was upset that a couple of brothers got some Showtime on ESPN to talk about MMA. Like, what more can we do? All we can do is play sports, rap, and and sing and shit, right? What more do you want us to do? Leave us alone. I think his podcast sucks. He probably tried comedy because it's Rogan's crew. Best comedy podcast is Believe You Me. Yep, I kind of agree with that one. It's a lifestyle show, Papa. Yeah, true. Do you remember he tried to do that? He tried to tell everybody the reason why he doesn't research or know fighters' names or has watched a fighter. Do you remember he that's why him and Darren Till aren't cool, right? Because Darren Till, whoever was gonna fight Darren Till, if you remember that story, I think they dropped out, and that's where Darren Sorry stepped in, right? And everyone was saying Darren Sorry don't take the fight because I think they wanted him to be the champion, but Darren Sorry doesn't care about belts; he just wants to fight, and he likes a good scrap. If I remember correctly, Brendan didn't know who Darren Till was, even though he was quite well known, in the UK circuit, I guess, or whatever circuit it was on prior, European one, let's say. And that's what led to their kind of beef, because he kind of dismissed Darren Till as like a nobody. Why are you fighting this kind of can? And then obviously Darren Till did what he did against what's his face? Dominic Cerrone? Not Dominic Cerrone. Anyway, you know who I mean, who had the fight he was, who he fought. So that unwillingness to prepare, that unwillingness to research stuff is legit what got him in, hot bother with some people when it comes to those kind of stuff. So that was hilarious. Brendan going away, good show, glad I found it. Brendan's in the street. But yeah, big up, man. Leave you for now. Thanks again for tuning in. It's been a pleasure to have your company. Like I said before, smash a like, hit subscribe if I've earned your subscription. Much appreciated. And if there's a response from Brendan, of course I'll be back. I'm not expecting it, but if there is a response, I'll be back to make another live stream comedy play-by-play videos we're doing here, and we're just going to keep this truck moving in it. But again, thanks again for tuning in, everybody. Really appreciate your time, really appreciate your support and words of encouragement, all that good stuff. Many blessings to you guys. I'll do the DSP begging prayer hands. Take care. Peace out, everyone. Peace out. Take care.